Hello, poker fans, and welcome to a very special edition of the Two Fish at the Table Poker Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Legend of Ben on Poker Stars.
And I'm Late Reg is completely unfair on Poker Stars, aka East Coast Samuel.
Well, we have a lot to talk about this time around because not only have we just seen the completion of the American World Series of Poker roster of bracelet events, we had the conclusion of the 2021 main event.
Yep.
And I am, have had long enough to digest my entire week-long trip to Las Vegas. And we're also going to briefly kind of give you a taste, a preview of our thoughts on the 2010 main event as well.
Yeah, I mean, the 2010 main event is such a long season. It's something like 24 episodes or something.
More than that. I think it's like 30 episodes.
Yeah, 30 episodes. So we're going to be breaking that up into a couple episodes. We might be able to do 2 more episodes just talking about
There's so much to talk about in that, just by sheer volume of episodes, for sure. So hence we're going to just kind of space them out a little bit, but still truly go into the differences and the details of all of the events outcome.
Yeah, and we will be talking about the 21 main event, and we are aware that there's going to be an edited version of this that will come out at some point on apparently CBS of all places. But we will get to that eventually. We're going to keep going in order, 2010, 2011, and so on, and we'll eventually get to the edited version and talk about that. We can talk about the differences between the live streams that we saw on Poker Go this month and the edited version. But for now, we're going to be talking about the unedited version and what happened. So be prepared for that episode in, 6
Well,
months.
I think some table setting before we even get into that, because I was the sideline support coach, cheerleader, whatever you want to call it, for our very close friend Adam, a longtime card player in many different disciplines. We flew in on November 6th so that he would play on day 1D of the main event, the originally scheduled last day 1 session before some scheduling prompted 2 more day 1 flights to be enacted. So I had the chance to see so many of the players that we have discussed, we'll see, have seen in their natural element. I had some conversations with a few, so I went through a quite enjoyable week in Vegas.
And I was working because that joke from last episode where I say I'm a freelance writer and I begs, that is what I did.
Yes.
So yeah, Ben, so just talk about your preparations about going to Vegas. This is your first time you've ever been to Vegas, right?
My first time in Vegas.
Yeah.
I've obviously seen it in many different TVs, movie shows, but it's a whole different story actually being there. Unlike most people who might go on a Vegas vacation, this was really kind of a poker-focused trip.
Right.
I wasn't there to sightsee a ton. I did sightsee a bit. I did, look through other tourist spots and casinos and hotels in the area. But I would say probably 70% of my trip was really in the Rio, being, getting immersed in the environment, the atmosphere, and the poker play.
Yeah, so going into your trip, I mean, how were you sort of thinking about what you were going to do? What sort of preparations did you make?
So, I am not super familiar with the style of my friend's poker play, but I knew that, with my almost encyclopedic knowledge of the main event, players, their coverage on TV and structure of the main event, I would argue as a non-professional poker player or even a semi-professional poker player, I'm a very much a main event expert,
right? Yeah.
As far as what to expect, the structure, the tournament details, everything besides sitting at a table and playing your hand. And so I knew that I could provide some advice and support for my friend that maybe other people wouldn't be able to do. And I also am kind of unbiased and sort of focusing on what needs to be focused on and getting to the crux of the matter.
So you say that, you're unbiased and you have sort of this expertise. Were you talking to Adam while he was playing?
So, each table draw, it could be X number of tables away from the rail.
Okay.
For the most part, I lucked out of his total of, I believe it was 5 different tables he was at. Really 4 out of 5, I had always had a clear line of sight of him, or he was very close to the rail.
Mm-hmm.
I can get into those details a bit later, but for the most part, he would, there's 2-hour breaks after every 2 hours is a break after every level. So we would talk a little bit about the events of that break. Sometimes he would get up from the table, walk to me, stretch his legs, exhale, tell me about a hand. He would text me now and then about his stack size, about a hand. If I was watching that hand, he could tell me afterwards what he had and what he was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a pretty consistent and steady communication throughout the play. He lasted, almost 3 full days. So that was a lot of times, particularly on the dinner breaks, that we really got to really just go into depth into what to do for the next phase of the tournament.
Mm-hmm. So were you providing sort of pushback against his play? Were you sort of commending him?
It's funny because he had some really difficult tables.
Yeah.
No players that I knew from watching ESPN or from YouTube or anything, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, or 2 extremes like Billy Baxter. But he had some tough tables, so he was definitely kind of keeping it, playing tight. He was a very gradual chipping up, letting the cards come to him, not overdoing it, not really bluffing, putting his tournament, at risk on a gambit.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really kind of just stick to the plan, hand by hand. Don't jump too far ahead in your thinking. Let's focus in the moment.
Mm-hmm. So just sort of sticking with this thread of how Adam did. So let's just sort of break this down day by day. Day 1, how do you think sort of things were going on?
So Adam, it was actually there was one table between his table and the rail. So I could, and Adam actually had the seat closest to the rail.
Oh, cool.
So that was a lucky break there. On day 1 again, the blinds are small. Players are playing more or less ABC poker, with maybe a few exceptions. He had a pretty aggressive table, so he was kind of hovering around the starting stack, or maybe the starting stack is about 60,000 chips.
Mm-hmm.
So he was really kind of in that 50 to 62,000 range the whole day. There were a couple of big hands, one right before the dinner break and one at the end of the day that he won. So that was kind of ending those levels on a strong note. So he ended day 1 at 64,200 chips.
Okay.
Again, a marginal increase in the starting stack, but you see a good healthy percentage of the field busting on day 1. So just chipping up at all is still an accomplishment for sure, especially when you're not a seasoned veteran poker player, which again, he has some poker experience. He's more of a PLO cash game specialist than anything else, with some no limit hold'em tournament work in there. But overall, he told me a lot of the situations he was in. I think he did the right thing, and we did see, ultimately he survived the day. He played from level 1, 11 a.m., minute 0 of the tournament onward. He didn't late reg or anything like that. So again, a marginal increase, but still an increase, and still getting your head into the game.
Yeah. So can you go over one of the hands that he played and what sort of happened?
Yeah. Day 1 is probably the day I knew, even though we spoke quite a bit. The hands weren't quite as significant per se.
Yeah.
The one hand I mentioned a minute ago was the last hand before the dinner break. This is at the end of level 3. Adam had called a pre-flop raise with Jack-9 suited, and the board ran out giving him a full house, jacks full of 9s, and he had made a sizable bet. I think it was about 6,000 or 7,000 on the river, and his opponent tanked for about 3 or 4 minutes into the break. So it was kind of funny because the whole field room was kind of cleared out basically, and eventually the guy made the call, and Adam took down a pretty good pot with the full house. Because he had been down to about 50,000 before that hand, so really that win got him back over kind of that 60,000 chip mark, which is mentally a pretty important deal to kind of be at status quo.
Of course, yeah. So going into his second day of play, how was that?
So Adam, again, 64,200 chips. He was 5th of 8 in chips at his table.
Okay.
So kind of it was not quite a full table being 9 players, and it was a table that had a pretty wide variety of chip stacks. You had a couple stacks the 80, 90,000 range, and one that was at 15,000, one that was in 20, 30 range. So Adam was kind of in the middle of it. And again, this table also very difficult. Adam particularly had a very challenging player right on his left that was very aggressive. Luckily, this table was actually right next to the rail, so I had a great view of the action the entire time. This table would stay together for it was about 3 hours, so a little over about 1.5 levels of the 5-level day. And so Adam was in a couple of tough spots for sure. He had a hand where he folded a pair of aces on the flop that would have made 2 pair, but the guy on his left had a set, so he avoided a lot of trouble there. He was holding his own, but he was kind of slightly down on the day when arguably the biggest hand of his entire tournament took place.
All right, so what happened?
So again, my friend Adam is a card player. He had some family in Vegas playing bridge.
Oh, okay.
So we knew beforehand that we could expect to see them at some point during that trip. And as it turns out, this is at the start of level 7. So again, level 2 of day 2. After about 2.5 to 3 hours of play, Adam, the blinds were, I believe, 500 and 1,000. Adam makes a raise to 2,400. 2 callers called the original raise of Adam. Another guy in the hand raises it up to like 8,000 something. It folds back to Adam. Adam immediately goes all in. The other 2 players that had called the 2,400 fold. The other guy that made the 3-bet does call. Adam turns over the ace of clubs and the ace of diamonds. Opponent turns over the ace of spades and the ace of hearts. As this is going on, the pre-flop action, I see in the corner of my eye my friend Adam's mom walking down. We were in the Amazon room at this point. She comes down. I say hi. I'm like, we're in the middle of a hand. Let's check out what's going on. And all of a sudden, I see the ace versus aces. I'm like, okay, well, chop it up. All of a sudden, the flop comes with 2 clubs.
Oh, no.
Adam, of course, holding the ace of clubs. So we're like, you know what? Oh, are we going to have a Kerry Katz, Connor Dorian situation? Again, 5% chance, 4 or 5% chance of anything going wrong.
Right,
Turn comes another club. All of a sudden, everyone at the table is like kind of perking up. Oh my god! And then the river comes another club, and Adam, his face, I captured it on my camera. His face was that of just complete shock. It was a sick moment. Now Adam was all in that hand. His opponent did have him covered by probably about 15, 20,000. So the other player, by no means out of the tournament yet, but he was steamed like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
So Adam chips up. He was at about 60,000. He's up to about 125,000 or so. A huge double up, and then unfortunately, shortly afterwards, that table would break. They would be moved from the Amazon room into the pavilion room. They'd be put at different tables, and from there, that was the one table where I didn't have a good spectator spot to really see his table. But I did find a seat at the pavilion room on the sort of stage area where I sat for a lot of day 2, and Adam did tell me he got aces 2 more times during level 7 and won both of those hands to hit over 200,000 chips after those hands were done.
Crazy.
So in just about half an hour's time, he went from about 60,000 chips on day 2 to 203,000 on day 2.
Wow.
So again, the blinds are 500, 1,000. That's a 200 plus big blinds. But ironically, despite all of that, Adam was not the chip winner at his table by any stretch of the means. I think he was 3rd or 4th in chips at his table.
Wow.
So even though he had a lot of chips, he really couldn't rule the table with an iron fist like you might expect a chip winner could do.
So how many chips did he end the day with?
So he actually would end up moving tables to a 3rd table on day 2, still in the pavilion room. And he told me that he folded all 36 hands at that table. He was card dead at that final table. So he ended up, and he had, of course, a few ups and downs with his chip stacks, but he ended the day at 164,000 chips at the end of day 2.
Respectable, yeah.
Which again, for the next day, day 3, the starting blinds would be 1,200, 2,400. So that's still good for 68 big blinds.
Okay.
A very healthy stack.
Yeah, so we're going into day 3, which everybody was sort of speculating the money bubble or not. Did you have any conversations with Adam about that going into day 3?
It's funny because on websites like Poker News, they would say how the officials' expectation is the bubble would be bursting on day 4, early on day 4, like level 1 and level 2 of day 4, and I have no reason to doubt that, but I noticed as day 3 would continue that the pace of eliminations was much faster than I would have ever expected. So approximately about 2,300 players were left in the tournament on day 3, and I'm as level 1 on day 3 is going on, level 2, level 3, a couple hundred players each level are busting. So things are really moving pretty quickly. Adam was actually at the second. Two tables were between his table and the rail, so the third table, if you're counting, out. And at his table, he was actually third in chips at his table. So, that's pretty good. I mean,
Sure, yeah.
Billy Baxter, 7-time bracelet winner, was at his table too.
Mm-hmm.
And a bunch of other players that had some pretty strong results. Tonio Roeder comes to mind, the man who would end up finishing, I believe, like 36 or something in the main event.
Wow, okay.
Pretty deep run. And that table was, Adam was bleeding chips for the first couple of levels, really not having much success.
Mm-hmm.
Ups and downs. He at one point told me he was down to 90,000 and just ripped in ace queen, 4-bet all in, and won the hand pre-flop to get back up to 120. And really from there, it was kind of a steady increase. He was playing small pots, winning most of them. 120,000, 130, 140, 150, 160, 170, 180. Knocks out a player, hits 210. So again, a very steady, strong day 3 for Adam until level 4 of day 3 happens.
Well, before we get to that last hit, I just want you to mention these bleeding chips. Was that because he was losing hands, or was that just because he was card
a very aggressive table, lots of anytime he raises, he gets 3 bets. Anytime he has a decent hand, he ends up folding it. He told me I'm folding ace jack under the gun because this table's so crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And again, with the blinds escalating, he was definitely picking his spots very carefully.
Mm-hmm. Were there any players at Adam's table that you just sort of saw in the corner yard that really impressed you?
Again, at that table, it's too far away from the rail to really.
Okay.
That was the table I had the least line of sight that I could see from where I was spectating. Honestly, for day 3, for the most part, I was observing the tables adjacent to the rail.
Yeah.
And there was some good stuff there that I can get into later, but it was just more kind of, we were just communicating non-verbally, thumbs up, thumbs down, and do like hand, so gestures to me. You text me, obviously every break we're still talking. That was never not a in the plan of attack.
So when he busts, how many players were left? Like, what was that?
So again, at the start of the 4th level of day 3, there were about 1,400 players left or so, maybe 1,300.
Wow.
So and again, by this point, they have the computer screens that shows you the blinds, the number of players left in the tournament, the timer for the level. So I'm pretty regularly taking a look at it, seeing how everything's progressing. So about halfway into this level, there's about 1,250 players left in the tournament. 1,000 are making the min cash of $15,000. So I'm thinking, I'm feeling pretty good at this point because he's got about 200,000 chips. He knocks out a player about 20 minutes ago. He's at 210,000. The blinds are 2,005 and 5,000. So he's got about 42 big blinds. So again, not short, not deep, but in a comfortable spot where you can play some hands. But then all of a sudden, I see him kind of like shaking his head. He stands up, and all of a sudden he walks over and says, "Ben, I just busted ace king against queens." And I was shocked because all day I've seen him avoid these big flip situations. It was his first flip of the tournament. It was really his first true all-in. If you ignore the aces versus aces, that was his first all-in the whole tournament.
Wow.
And he loses in a flip. Never improved, never cut a draw. And with about, again, 1,250, so ultimately 4 hours away from the bubble bursting, he burst 27 hours into the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, flips are always so tough to navigate. I mean, it happens in pretty much every tournament player can identify, like, if that flip goes the other way, I'm not going to win, or if that flip goes the other way, I'm going to win. Yeah, I mean,
it was unfortunate, but I think he could have played the hand differently. Maybe he also expressed some reservations. Could I have done this? Could have done that? The action was he raised it to like 13,000 pre-flop of ace king, 3-bet to 36,000 by a player he had told me was raising like every hand. And then Adam had tanked for a little bit, and then he moved all in for 210,000, which I think for a 4-bet that the ratio I think that's just too much. That's 6 times the size of the 3-bet. So I think that's just too big. I think you make it 80,000, and then even if the results are the same thing, I think just in retrospect that's how you should play it instead of the 210,000.
Yeah, I'm with you. Or just call the 36. Just see a flop, get away from it. You still got plenty of chips left to play.
Yes, but he was playing for the win, not for the money, which I get. But I still think you should kind of weigh in both at the same time when it's only your second main event ever and you're that close to a mini cash.
Yeah, we should mention that this is his second main event. He got to day 3 on his first one.
Yeah, so it's a pretty making it to day 3 twice is definitely impressive. I mean, he did eclipse how far into day 3 he lasted. So that's progress. But I just think maybe you could have played that one hand differently when you have such a strong plan that you stick to for 27 hours and then in 2 minutes you burn through it.
Yeah, I mean, but if he wins that hand, he's cashing.
Yes.
So it's a tough spot.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on from Adam specifically, you were talking about other players that you saw.
I mean, literally everywhere you go. I walked through the Rio poker rooms from day 1C through day 3. Mm-hmm. Every day it was happening, and I could just see all these players that I knew very well. I knew kind of well. I knew from TV, past number 9ers. And I kind of break these into 3 categories. One is players I just kind of, where's Waldo? I found them, I saw them, watched them briefly, whatever. There are ones that I had the briefest of like hello or big fan or whatever, moments. And then there's ones where I had like full blown like interactions, like moments, like chapters in history in my life with. So I had plenty of all 3, and it made the trip absolutely a blast.
Mm-hmm. So, of the players that you saw playing, who would you say was the best? Or are there any sort of impressive moves that you saw? Anything?
Well,
like that?
so there's just the number 9ers like Ben Lamb, or Cliff Josephine that you can't always tell how they're playing because you're only just watching table from like a snapshot. Probably the most substantial action I watched was on day 3, the table that was closest to the rail. The poker player Dragana Lim, the last woman standing in the tournament, who got 60th place, I believe. She was playing at that table, and her family was actually watching her play. And I was, she was in between Adam's table and the rail, so I was watching her table, and she was absolutely crushing that table. I was very impressed. Pretty much for the entire part of day 3 that I was there, she was winning pretty much. I would say half of all pots were going to her, and she was accumulating a ton of chips. Like she was at 1 million chips when the blinds were like 2,500 and 5,000, which is unbelievable. And it definitely gave me someone to root for once Adam busted, because probably of all the players that I didn't, travel to Vegas for, that was the one I felt most invested in their poker play because of what I witnessed while I was watching in the Amazon room.
That's really cool. So where's Waldo? What did you see?
There's so many. I saw, all of a sudden there's players playing. There's people in the broadcast, walking around, reporters. So I saw Tiffany Michelle, Maria Ho, Norman Shad, Jeff Platt. I didn't want to disrupt their flow, so I just let them. I didn't say hi. I wanted them to do their thing, focus. So those are just kind of the ones I saw. I briefly saw Negreanu on day 1 in like the far corner where his table was. I didn't have any interaction with him, but that was there. I saw James Woods, Doyle Brunson, J.J. Liu, who Brunson and Liu were, kind of infamous being on the TV table on I think day 1A of the Poker Go broadcast. So that was kind of cool. I saw Mark Newhouse. I saw the Ott twin brothers, Dane Ott and his brother. I forget his first name. I saw the Ruan twins, Michael Ruan and his twin brother. It was those. I think those are probably the most of that category of people I saw. That was it.
Okay, so category 2.
Category 2. I got a baby from Scotty to win. I saw him. He was walking down the Amazon room and said, "Oh my God, hey Scotty, good luck." He said, "Thank you, baby." Pretty awesome.
That's wonderful.
I spoke briefly to Neil Farrell. I said, "Good luck to him, man. Good, you're doing great." While I was going to the bathroom, I saw Amir Lehavot walking out of the bathroom. I'm like, "Oh my God, is that Amir Lehavot?" He turned his head like, "Oh my God, good luck, man." He's like, "Thanks, you too." As if I was playing. So I thought that's pretty funny.
That's funny.
On day 2, ABD, while I was sitting on the stage area, the pavilion room, Phil Hellmuth, completely out of my peripheral vision, walks past me. And I just sort of casually say, "Hey, Phil," and he kind of turns his head and says, and it was unbelievable. Like, oh man, that was awesome. And then I did see. I guess I saw Grinder playing at his day 3 table. I somehow missed his bus hand, ironically.
Oh, that's a shame.
Let's see. Is it really? Okay, Jason Kuhn. I saw him. Said, "Oh my God, man, big fan. Good luck." He says, "Thank you." And that was in the hallway of the poker building. So that was pretty cool for sure.
And then of the players you spoke to, like actually.
So I would say there's only 2. Firstly, Jungleman
Oh, yeah.
Daniel Cates. So he was being sort of honored with his bracelet by Jack Effel in the Amazon room. And after they'd filmed it, he was just kind of standing next to the railing of the front sort of the Poker Go studio area, and he was still in his kind of Street Fighter Dragon Ball Super costume. So for that ceremony, the same one he wore for his bracelet win. So while he wasn't talking to anybody else, I said, "Oh, gentlemen, big fan. Congratulations." He said, "Thank you." And I asked him about his costume. He said, "Yeah, it's kind of going for like a combination of a couple things." I'm like, "Yeah, that's great. Good job, man." And so it was a short conversation, maybe like 45-second conversation, but it was still very, very cool.
That's cool.
Because I'd watched just that night prior the highlights of his bracelet win with his epic Kamehameha after Ryan Lang folds the winning hand on Limit Hold'em with getting 11-1 odds on the river on a all-in by gentleman. So
one of the worst folds ever. I'm sorry. No offense to the guy. He's a better poker player than me, but that's one of the worst.
Absolutely.
And then I feel like I can just say Matusow, question mark. So go ahead. What happened?
So basically, at the very end of day two, after Adam had finished up his table in the pavilion room, we were heading over along with Adam's brother to the Amazon room just to kind of walk around and see what was going on.
Sure.
And I had seen Matusow on one of the secondary tables on the Poker Go broadcast that day, so I knew he was there that night. And so as we're walking over, we see Matusow. He's kind of ranting at Jeff Platt at how bad his table is. He particularly, I remember him talking about how all these players are taking on the small edge hands when they should go for the big edge hands. This is the main event, and these guys are so bad. I got 50 big blinds, and I've outlasted all these players because. And then the rant shifted suddenly from the small edge, big edge topic to his complaints, which he's kind of been known for this past month about his stance on Max Late Reg in the main event. And so he starts yelling to Jeff Platt, "Wow, this is ridiculous. Like I've been working my ass off with 50 big blinds, and I feel like I've done amazing. And all of a sudden, these people come in and they've outlasted a fourth of the field for nothing." And while he's yelling, he's very expressive with his hands, and he's kind of gesturing to air. But one of the gestures he makes kind of to air, he's absolutely gesturing towards Adam's brother Zach. So we kind of feel like we're almost kind of like this invisible lasso is kind of pulling us into the conversation. So we kind of slowly kind of shift over, and Matusow starts to kind of like turn to us a little bit as if he's trying to like illustrate that there's other people that echo his thoughts on this topic. And then my friend, it was Zach here, decides to pull out his phone and sort of start recording this. So this is really kind of the middle portion of this interaction because he's so amped. And obviously, you can watch the video we posted on our channel on YouTube of the Mike Matusow rant, which has gotten some interesting coverage on Reddit for sure, the response to the video. But and so that part will speak for itself. Then after that part of this interaction, I say, "Matusow, big fan." I mentioned his interview at the end of his 08 bust out, like how I really felt his like maturity and I think that's one of the most touching moments he's been on TV for. And he said, and he asked me like before I clarified, he was like, "Which one was that one again?" I was like, and I elaborated, and I shook his hand and I said, "Big fan." I said, "Good luck," because he had survived day two, so obviously when he's in the main event, that's still entertaining for me. So I don't, as much as I might joke about him and disagree with some of his points, I still like to see him poker it up for sure.
Yeah, and do you agree with him? What's your opinion about Late Reg and stuff?
I mean, so we were kind of trolling him. I mean, we were kind of egging him on because if we egg him on, he'll talk more, and that's just entertainment. And so I get his point. I don't think you need to like just go so ape shit in front of Jeff Platt to talk about this. But I mean, with the main event, I get it. My stance on the main event, I am okay with registering at any part of day one.
Yeah,
that's my stance.
Yeah, me too.
I know that Phil Hellmuth would always register and then leave it stacked there for like hours before showing up. But I said you should be allowed to register for the main event anytime. I guess maybe until the last hour of the day. I don't know. I feel like if you register in like 1 minute to spare, it's kind of weird. But day two reg, I'm against that, I guess. But obviously the main event this year, the late reg ended at the end of level 2 of day two.
Right,
so that's again 4 hours of play where I saw firsthand a lot of players are busting out on day one, let alone day two. So I see where there could be some reservation on that rule.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I'd say my ethos is the more the merrier. The more players you have in the tournament, the higher the cash is going to be at the end. But yeah, I mean, I think he has a point that maybe they shouldn't have day two Reg or whatnot.
And I should say this though, is that I did feel that this is just after my friend had survived day two, just walking into the Amazon room and seeing him so angry, like as if we're just a snapshot of the classic Matusow temper, anger, blow up, steam. It was just one of the most incredible half hours of my life. Just that entire half hour made the whole trip worth it. I mean, I could barely stop laughing. Like just in the video, you can kind of just hear me. I'm barely able to talk about laughing because I'm just so amused by this whole situation. I mean, it was unbelievable. I'm Matusow, if you ever listen to this, I mean, I'm a fan of yours, so thank you for that memory. But
yeah, you're awesome, buddy. Like we're not. We said trolling in the title. We don't hate you or anything. This is great.
I mean, it was just so incredible to see this person I've seen on TV for 17 years literally talk to me and shake hands with me and make me be a part of this moment of poker history for me.
Yeah, and telling my friends and family about, because Ben and I were texting back and forth during the main event. You told me that I met Matusow and whatnot. And you showed me the video before you uploaded it on YouTube, and I showed it to my parents, and they were freaking out. It was really funny. I'm telling my dad Ben bumped into Mike Matusow. He's like, who's he? He's like, he's this crazy guy. And I told him all these Matusow stories. It was that was the highlight for me, hearing the different stories from you during the main event. It's fun. But again, we love you, Matusow. Not trying to slight you. We'll be on your podcast if you want us.
And we're happy to have you on ours too.
Yeah. So in terms of just what did you do when you weren't when you weren't watching poker?
Well, so when I wasn't, my back would hurt after standing around for hours. So I would take breaks. I would walk. I would rest in the hallway on one of the benches. Sometimes I'd go back to the hotel room and watch some of the stream. So I watched a good chunk of the Poker Go stream. So I was pretty up to date with other poker rooms, other day ones and day twos of what was going on. Really for those first three, days 1A through day 3. I had to fly home on the day of day 4.
Oh, okay.
So I wasn't able to stay up that night to watch the bubble burst. I would have loved to, but given that I would busted, I think it was okay to not do that.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So you mentioned that you went a bit on a sightseeing through Vegas.
A little bit, went to downtown Vegas, the Mob Museum. Did some walking down the strip, seeing some of the other casinos, the Aria, the Bellagio, etc. So again, it was fun, but again, that was not the focus of the trip. And I'm happy I did that, because it means that if I go back to Vegas, I can have this sort of mental demarcation of a poker trip versus a Vegas trip. So I think that it would help prevent the next trip to Vegas being as redundant as it could have been.
Oh, that's fair enough. Yeah. Did you play?
I did play one tournament, and you had to bring that up. I played a $200 daily deep stack WSOP at the Rio tournament. So $200 to enter, 15,000 starting stack, half-hour levels. I thought that was the best structure to get the best bang for my buck, because it was definitely a frugal sort of style trip to Vegas. I wasn't trying to be overspend on stuff in Vegas. So that was kind of my splurging for the trip. But unfortunately, I had to wait in line for quite an hour to register, because they didn't have enough people to man the booths. So I actually, even though I got there early, I missed the first level of the tournament.
Wow.
So instead of having 150 big blind stack to start the day, I had 75 big blind stack to start the tournament. And well, from there, half-hour levels, things move pretty fast.
Yeah.
I lasted a total of 3 hours in this tournament. I won one hand the whole tournament. And the one hand I won, it was the first hand after the first break. So after the first 2 hours of the tournament. So I'd been playing for about an hour and a half by that point. I had lost over half my starting stack, hadn't won a hand, and I was big blind the very first hand after the break. I had 6-4 suited, limp under the gun +1, folds around. I just checked the big blind. 3 bricks on the flop, check. A 4 comes on the turn, so I have bottom pair with no kicker really. Check again. River pairs the board. I think it was a 9. And I goes check. I have a 4. I win. Basically my big blind ante, my big blind back, 1 big blind in the small blind. So I win 900 chips in that that one hand I won.
So you just kind of bled out. That's sort of.
I played like 3 hands. I saw like 4 flops the whole time.
Oh jeez.
And the one time I maybe played 2 hands wrong. And to even say wrong is kind of pushing it. I had king queen.
Mm-hmm.
I had meant to raise pre-flop, but I guess I incorrectly raised. I put out 1 chip worth 1,000, and they called that a call, even though I had chips that were denominations for the big blind. And I thought it was pretty obvious that if I wanted to call, I could have just done that. That's why I didn't. That's why king queen. So I got like 5 limpers. The flop comes ace 9-3. It checks to me. Everyone checks around to me, and so I figure I'm just gonna rep the ace, and I'll probably get maybe someone calls, but at least then I'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I bet that the guy immediately actually min raises me.
Oh dear.
Everybody else folds, and then I just snap fold.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, what am I hoping for there? So I lost 1,000 chips out of 15,000 in that hand. 200 was the big blind. 800 was the C bet.
Mm-hmm.
So again, not really a mistake, I don't think, because I was trying to make 1,000 people anyway, so I would have lost 1,000 anyway.
Yeah, that's fine.
So then the other hand I misplayed. I had Jack 10. I flipped the straight draw. I called 2 bets on the flop and river. Flop and turn to try to hit the straight. I missed. The guy had second pair and checked it down on the river.
Mm-hmm. Did you have overs or?
No. It was king queen like 3 on the flop. I had Jack 10.
Oh, okay.
But no flush draws, and so I thought I had nothing. I was just trying to hit straight. As I just had no chips and I had no cards. The best hand I got the whole tournament was pocket 5s, and I ended up folding it in kind of a frustrating outcome. I had 5s. I was under the gun like +2. I just folded under the gun. I had like 10 big blinds. 3 players after me go all in. They all have a combined like 5 overcards to my 5s. The board comes like 5-4, 4-3-2. I would have made a full house and won and like quintupled up, but it wasn't. So that was the one hand I could have won if I had played something folded. But I mean, what can you do?
And what was your best out?
Bust out hand. So I was under the gun. I had 6 big blinds, so I'm gonna have 1/3 of my chips in the next hand in the middle.
Okay.
I had king jack suited, king jack of clubs. I go all in. 2 spots over to my left. One guy calls, folds to the small blind. He goes all in.
Oh dear.
Original caller folds. So the guy that moved all in had ace king.
Oh dear.
I have king jack, but I always have a chance to triple up. I mean, you hit some clubs, a jack or a straight or something, and you triple up. I mean that's it's not ideal, but it's not the worst case scenario in the world. I flip a straight draw. On the flop, it comes like queen 9, like 6.
Yeah.
So a 10 or a jack gets me something, but there's no clubs. And then it comes brick. So I bust. I would have had like almost 20,000 chips if the blind's 400, 800 probably. If I win that hand, so I have a chance to. But I mean, when you get down nothing, I had 3s twice, 5s once, and then my best ace was like ace 7 offsuit, and I never had. I had king queen once and king jack once. I mean, I just had nothing. So it was a little frustrating.
Yeah.
But even though I made some quote-unquote mistakes, they weren't really mistakes because you're trying to accumulate chips in a fast-moving tournament. So I don't think. Long-term poker-wise, they're bad plays per se.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
But when you don't have any chips, you can't do anything. Any chips or any cards, you can't do anything.
Of course, yeah.
So again, frustrating, but I didn't embarrass myself, and I lasted 3 hours in a hyper tournament with no cards, and that's something to hold your head on, I guess.
Yeah, sure. And you can learn from it in some way.
I mean, I wish I could learn from it. I mean, what can I do? I mean, I guess if I play the 5s, it's a different story. But even then, if pre-flop, it's not a mistake when you have 3 or 4 people going all in with like ace king, king queen, ace 10, queen jack. I mean, come on.
Yeah. So any sort of advice for anybody who's planning to go to Vegas?
Well, it's funny because as a spectator, I had free range of the whole everything.
Right. Yeah.
There was no security saying, "What are you doing here?" or "Can you can't be here." There was no pass I needed. There was nothing. I didn't even need to show a vaccine card, which I think was kind of strange.
Wow. Okay.
I didn't have to show ID ever. I mean, I guess I look older than I used to. But still, I mean, it was a very. I mean, it was. If you're as big a poker nerd as me, I recommend checking it out, especially if you know somebody playing. We also met Steve Zolotow. He's a big bridge player, so he knew my friend Adam from bridge, and Stevie Z made a deep run in the main event. I think he made like 240th place or something like that.
Yes,
so he did pretty good too. So that was definitely a big thing too.
Excellent. I'm glad you had fun.
It was great.
Sounds like you had a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Next main event is in July, so I'll try to make it out. I can't make any promises about that. somebody would like to, give me $10,000, I'll see what I can do.
Hey, you know what? We can start a fund here if our listeners. You know what? If anybody wants to have a piece of our Vegas action next year, we'll work out no markup at all.
Yeah.
We'll work out a deal, and we'll call it the Two Fish Poker Fund.
Yeah. You should probably want to invest in our friend who's the actual card player instead of us.
Hey, daily deep stack. We can do a daily deep stack.
Daily deep stack.
You and me. Anybody that contributes to the Daily Deep Stack Poker Fund package for Ben or Sam gets a name drop on the podcast and can ask any question that we will definitely answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Or just donate to charity.
I know, that's probably a better idea.
All right, so moving on into the 21 main event. How did you feel it went overall?
So it's funny, because I was so deeply entrenched in the day 1 through day 3 main event, I was really kind of focusing on two things. One was players that I've known for forever.
Right.
And two was just players that I had any sort of crossing of our paths in my week stay in Vegas. So as a result of that, I didn't really care about the final couple of days of the tournament because there wasn't really any players I had any sort of attachment to.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned in the players that you meet, you didn't mention anybody who made the final table. You didn't meet.
Correct. I didn't see anybody. I didn't know these players, whether I met them there or not. So I really once guys like Jason Koons were on a limb, were out. I didn't really have any attachment to the tournament. So, but I was so deeply entwined in those early days. Yeah. I feel like the brain space and the focus I would have had across the whole tournament was kind of spread more clustered into those first few days.
Yeah, and for my part, I tried to watch as much of that as I could.
Yes.
But I do have a 40-hour work week. I hate staying up.
Yeah, I had work and other plans some of those days as well, so I couldn't eyeball the live streams every day.
Yeah, generally my habit was to just try to watch as much as I could on Poker Go and then fill in the gaps by reading the WSOP updates, the morning after.
I mean, it was great to see guys like Chris Moneymaker as the chip leader at one point, even if he kind of blew a lot of it. We saw Joel Brunson make his first reappearance in the main event in the last 7 or 8 years. That's very cool.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was very nice.
And obviously I saw various players, during my week stay make decentish runs. I mean, Matusow had a pretty decent run, for example. Helmuth had a very swift day 3 exit, though.
Seems like it.
So again, the tournament, I think really on the differences in the broadcast of at least the live streams. There was some similar. It was kind of a hybrid between the quote unquote live streams that ESPN and Poker Go would kind of alternate with in like 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
Jeff Platt, of course, being the prominent sort of in-the-field reporter instead of, I forget his name. What was his name?
Joe Stapleton.
Joe Stapleton. They kicked him out and had Jeff Platt sort of take his place. And I do have some thoughts on Jeff Platt's style.
Me too, yeah.
And but I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, so as I mentioned, again, full disclosure, didn't watch everything that Poker Go broadcast. Wasn't able even to watch the entire final table because I can't stay up late. I'm biologically incapable of staying up past 10:30. I have to go to bed. I'm on the poker subreddit, as are you, Ben. And, I saw a lot of people criticizing Poker Go. I'd say that I have a little bit better feelings on Poker Go than I'd say like the average Redditor. But I'd say like overall, the biggest problem that I have with Poker Go is your streaming schedule. It's okay if you have to like push back the coverage, change the schedule because you've got technical problems. To do so just without announcing it on Twitter, not announcing it on Reddit, just all of a sudden we're going to broadcast at 11 p.m. instead of 8 p.m., I think is just extraordinarily unfair. They did that a couple times.
Wow.
Also, it was the first part of the final table. They're going to broadcast at 8 o'clock. All of a sudden, without a blue, they transitioned to 6:30. Without telling anybody. So here I am like preparing, just sort of like, I have it in my head at 8 o'clock and I just checked WSOP randomly at 7. I'm like, wait, it's already started. I have to go on Poker Go. So I actually missed the first 2 bust outs because of that, which is really annoying. And also the fact that they had no day 1B was really weird. They have all the other days except that one. I just think is very odd. And honestly, like, I don't really see what the problem is with just having full coverage of the entire thing. Why start coverage just like 8 o'clock? Why not just have cameras? Just have cameras on the 3 main tables.
What I didn't understand is that they would begin the live coverage at the start of level 3 of the day, which is strange. I'd be okay if it was level 2 even.
Yeah.
Give players a chance to play without the cameras they got set up. They have to interview players to get some fun facts about them, get their pictures taken, and you don't want to compress it all early in the morning. So that I understand. But after the first day, where you have the same producers, the same directors, the same setup, why are you dragging your feet the next day when you have everything ready to go?
Yeah, exactly. Just have cameras on the 3 tables.
Not to mention, they did not always have 3 full tables in play. There were a couple of days there was only 2, and I couldn't understand why. And now I'll give them credit, they didn't change the table midway through a stream of it. But they had a lot of repeat players, like Maria Ho a couple times. And I think each day should be a fresh slate of players, but obviously important players.
Right, of course. Yeah.
But I disagree with that.
Yeah, and in terms of the 3rd table, which it seems like they barely went to, and I don't even think they had like hole cards. I think they didn't have RFID chips.
I don't think they did.
Which I think is ridiculous.
Because I'm pretty sure in years past they had that.
Yeah.
For all the tables.
They did. Like, why don't you have that for the
2019, 2018, I think that was not an issue back then.
Yeah, it's a very strange choice to not have those in.
Yeah.
In terms of Jeff Platt, I mean, I think I like Jeff Platt more than Joe Stapleton. I'll say that. Joe Stapleton just tried too hard to be
I'm with you there.
Yeah, and he also just seems like a nice guy.
Yes.
He doesn't try to mug for the camera or anything.
Yes.
I just found his segments kind of awkward.
I completely agree. The most awkward possibly of all time in poker broadcasting.
I'm trying to remember. I think it was on day 3 or something. There was this segment where he goes to a table where there were, I think, 3 guys named Michael that were supposed to be sitting next to each other. So he goes up to the table, right? He's like, "There's 3 guys named Michael sitting next to each other. What's your name, Michael? What's your name, Michael? What's your name?" I'm not Michael. The 3rd Michael had busted. So he's trying to talk to the other 2 Michaels, and they're like in the middle of a hand.
Yeah.
And the 2 Michaels are just kind of like, we don't really want to talk to you. So Jeff just cuts the segment short, and that's it.
The biggest problem was that Jeff would have a line. He would walk up to a table and say, "Hey man, come stand up and talk to us for a second. I want you to miss the hand."
Right.
And that would happen like every single time he went to a table, and it's so repetitive. It really bugged me.
Yeah, it's okay to like just in breaks interview the players, but like they have to cut it short so that they can do a hand. Oftentimes during an interview, a hand will be dealt and the player has to step away and check their cards and then muck. Like you should just wait for the breaks.
The problem was that they were kind of broadcasting kind of raw, like they weren't really edited after they shot it, which really showed at numerous times because it was just awkward time usage.
Yeah,
this wasn't quite live TV per se, even though it kind of is, but not on like a channel per se. So it's not as egregious, maybe, but it still definitely was bothersome to me.
Yeah, and it would just happen at just odd moments, just sort of randomly, and sometimes they would have to like cut in the middle of hands at the feater table or something.
Yes. The one thing I did like was when they would use the little broadcasting image of like pavilion room, Amazon room, because it gave you a better sense of like. Because me being there, I knew which each room was and how they differed and what. That was kind of cool. I was okay with that.
Yeah, by the way, I was not able to find Ben or Adam on the footage. Maybe they're out there. I didn't watch
There was a brief shot on day 3, because I knew where his table was. I could like see the table, and I could see like a small smidgen of him in frame, sort of. But it's so zoomed out that it's really hard to be like, oh, that's him. Yeah. But I was surprised I never showed up because I was the most regular rail spectator for those first 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody else, people didn't stay as long as I did or as often as I did. So I was hoping maybe I'd get some sort of notoriety of being like the most dedicated spectator. But
you should have had a sign or something.
I thought the sign thing isn't as appropriate now as it was like 10, 15 years ago. Because because you're not like on bleachers, you're not on seats, you're standing and you're not really The sign is just kind of, it just doesn't make sense in the context.
Or just like a costume or something. I don't know.
I had my Survivor buff on my neck for a lot of it. No one asked me about it, unfortunately.
You should have done stack 'em at the top.
I did, but not very loudly.
All right, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then just in terms of a couple other, poker things, I thought the commentators were pretty good for the most part.
It's funny because Poker Go does have that beta live chat testing thing, and people were pretty harsh on Jamie Kerstetter.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't think I prefer Esfandiaro. He's my favorite third wheel in the booth with Norm and Lon. And they had so many hours of broadcasting. They're going to obviously have rotating who's talking.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just feel like it's fun. No, it's fun. This entire time I missed him. He's my favorite. He kind of has both the poker mind and kind of that natural charisma flow of speaking for TV that I don't think anybody else has besides Lon and Norm.
Yeah, I mean, I like Jamie a lot, and there were, multiple times where she, predicted, the player's going to bet this, and the player would go and bet it. I think a lot, by Poker Go, just get rid of the chat. The chat is, full of sexist, racist stuff. I saw some stuff in there that's just, really gross. Yeah. I think that's why Jamie gets criticized, is sexism, frankly.
Hey, politics free.
All right, politics free. All right, that's my one moment. I was just finished my... third political campaign. I have to step on this. Yeah, I like the duo of Ollie and Nick, even if Nick says "right you are, Ollie" a few too many times. I like them as a duo. I kind of wish maybe they'd switched off a little, a little bit more of them earlier on. I know they have the night shift or whatever. But yeah. One thing that I would say about the commentators is when you have people like Matusow playing and they're talking at the table, let them talk. There were so many times they were talking over the players that were talking, and I would have liked to have heard more.
Yeah, that bugs me too, for sure.
Yeah.
It's been a problem.
Yeah, but overall, in terms of the, Poker Go experience, I'd say, this was the first year where it was really, them 100%, whereas before they had ESPN. I don't really know what CBS Sports is doing.
Me neither.
Yeah, if they're just broadcasting the edited version, I don't know. But, it's fine. I'd say really the scheduling thing and a couple technical issues here and there. That they would, sometimes start the stream, but there would be a countdown clock for 15 minutes or whatever. I think that's stupid too.
I agree.
Yeah, and then the play, I'd say the play overall was, fine.
There were some pretty funny hands that we saw. I don't know how many of them will eventually make it into the broadcast later down the street, in the episodes. But there was there was one hand where Jeff Platt comes over to a guy, is talking to him, the guy goes all in blind and then gets called and then has a crap hand and winds up busting a player. Then he put totally blind. That was pretty funny. There was one pretty infamous tank. I forget. I think it was on day 3 or 4 where the guy tanked for 10 minutes into the break.
Oh yeah.
And that was pretty. There were some memorable hands for sure. Moneymaker making a couple big hands, a lot of big folds. Doyle Brunson folding it straight to Jason Koon's flush. There's some good stuff in there that I'm sure we'll eventually see in another form down the line.
One hand that I will bet you makes it. Rigby 3-deuce against the Kings.
Absolutely.
I saw that live. I hadn't seen Rigby's other hands. That blew my mind. I texted you right after that hand. I'm I want Rigby to win. That was so crazy.
Absolutely. No, some very memorable hands. I would say much less of a slog fest as sometimes those live streams, hand quality wise, can be for sure. So that was enjoyable for sure.
Yeah, and in terms of the final table. I'd say the most memorable hand is just Lococo donking off his stack.
It's funny because it was kind of a Joe McKeon style final table set up. You have one super duper chip leader, a lot of short stacks, and that affects the overall narrative of the table because of just the stack size affecting the gameplay decisions. So not only did you see Aldemir, for the most part, always having the chip lead until the very end, briefly. You had a lot of pretty quick bust outs due to the short stacks at the table. So it's so much so that the first day of the final table, they had originally planned 3 days of 9 down to 6, 6 down to 3, 3 down to 1. They went down to 3 players after the first night.
Yeah, and it was almost down heads up. Jack Oliver almost busted out in that last game too, but he survived. Yeah, and George Holmes, I had my eye on him since day 6 or something. I thought he was a really even-keeled, good player. Hell of a story. I wish he had pulled off the win. I think he could have gotten away from the king on that last hand and kept in the action. But
well, it's funny because we're always discussing the different types of bust-out hands.
Yeah.
Heads up for the main event championship. That was definitely, I think, on the more unique side of permutations of how those hands have played out before.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess it reminds me of a little bit, but not quite, of the Demidov Eastgate hand, in that a strong hand gets called off by a better hand, although Eastgate basically had the nuts. It wasn't much of a thought for him, whereas Aldemir did still have a decision. So maybe that's a bit of a stretch to compare the two. Yeah. But it was definitely a unique kind of ending.
Yeah.
When you had two fairly evenish chip stacks going crazy at the very end on the river.
Yeah, I mean, Aldemir, I think, definitely deserved the win, but I would have liked to have seen George Holmes pull it off. I was actually so bummed out the day afterward. Like, I would just be like, when I wasn't working, I'd just be sitting there from a bench like, why couldn't George Holmes win?
I'll be honest with you. I did not watch any of the final table live.
Oh, okay.
I had worked both nights.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I wasn't able to watch it, and I don't think I really feel like I need to. Maybe if we need to for a rewatch down the line, but I mean, good for Aldemir, but I didn't know who he was before the tournament, and I guess he was the most accomplished pro of the final table anyway. But I mean, he's not going to go down in my pantheon of memorable main event champions.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, it's the McKeon example's apt. He was the player going into it that everybody had their eye on, had the most chips, just sort of played good big stack poker.
Yeah.
And just hung on to his lead. George Holmes gave him a little bit of trouble at the end, but he was ultimately able to pull it off. So, good for Aldemir. Again, George Holmes is, just awesome. Yeah, I think that's about it, unless you want to talk about the shot clock and whether or not we're going to have a shot clock or not.
I mean, the shot clocks do exist in some of the high roller tournaments already, so it's not much of a stretch to assume that those will gradually seep into more and more games going forward. Something I think we almost forgot to mention is the prominence of Negreanu, Josh Aurier, and Helmuth in numerous final tables. A very intense Player of the Year race for sure. It really could have gone to any one of them as the events were playing out. Negreanu and Helmuth making multiple final tables, sometimes at the same time.
Yeah.
Helmuth did win a bracelet pretty early in the World Series. Yep. Josh Aurier won 2. Negreanu again comes very close and just can't quite pull it off. I feel for him because, how many times can you lose a coin flip to win a bracelet in a row? I mean, it's really kind of, if he wins, he could have easily won 3 bracelets this year.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys all saw the hand where Phil Hellmuth rivers it and Negreanu throws the chair. It was in the Omaha, the event that Jeremy Osmus won. You could just tell that Negreanu wants it so badly, and he's come so close so many times lately, and he just can't pull it off.
Yeah.
Still, I mean, he was 3rd in the POI race. That's still very impressive. I mean, but Josh Aurier, what a series.
From Harry Demetriou being rude to him and stuff, and to all of a sudden making these amazing moves and winning Player of the Year. I had no idea he was capable of this, but good for him.
Yeah.
And we'll see if he can kind of make a good one of it next year for a repeat Player of the Year.
Yeah, going back to the shot clock in the main event, because it does seem like this is going to be the last year where there is no shot clock. I have a feeling that they're going to institute one. I don't really believe in a shot clock personally.
I don't, unless the levels are only so long that if you let someone tank for 10 minutes, that's a large percentage of the overall level. Like in a hyper tournament, like the big 1-for-1 drop, for instance, is a pretty fast structure. For example, I'm okay with having shot clocks there because it's with not much money involved. You don't want someone to be affecting your chance of winning by taking that long at one hand.
Yeah, and I think at a minimum, at the money bubble and then the final 3 tables, I don't think there should be any shot clocks. I think you should have as much time as you need in those situations where the stress is so high to be able to think that over. And I think it disadvantages players who have motor and sensor processing problems. Some players need time in order to think things through. 30 seconds seems to be the shot clock that's most common.
Well, I feel like if a tournament's rules are clearly stated in advance and everyone agrees to them, then I'm fine for it. So if there's like the big 1-for-1 drop, $1 million buy-in, shot clock, everyone signs up for it, everyone votes for it, everyone says okay, then okay.
Yeah, but the thing is about something like the main event is you have so many regular players. some of whom have never played a live tournament before, others of whom have just done home games and tournaments in casinos, local casinos where they don't have shot clocks. All of a sudden, they're going from that environment where they have time to think things over to an environment where they have 30 seconds to think things over. I mean, the shot clock, if you want to have a 2-minute shot clock, I'd be more okay with that.
With that. I'm not okay with 30-second shot clock.
Yeah,
I wasn't suggesting 30 seconds. I was suggesting you can have one, but just not be so short and just obviously be very consistent with the rules and the ruling and the fairness of it. And I think there should be a provision for counting an all-in bet, counting a bet if it's like that's obviously separate. I would say the clock should start after the exact bet size is known. If it's not verbally spoken, of course.
Right, of course, yeah. And I also just feel like table talk. And
I think that it should not be in the main event until it is in other mainstream events and it has worked in those events, like a 5K tournament or a different 10K tournament. Not not just the high rollers or the poker player championships type of games.
And the other, I'm with you on that. And the other thing is like this whole conversation about there needs to be more table talk. If you have a shot clock, you make it a lot harder for people to talk to each other, I think. I feel like you need time to build a rapport. And also the suspense that's within like a long decision, right? The bluff of the century between Farha and Moneymaker. That hand took 10 minutes for Farha to finally muck his cards. Yeah. And I know that, sitting there for 10 minutes, like just seeing Farha stew over that, it adds so much tension. It's just so suspenseful. I mean, the table talk, like Jamie Gold, if he had a 30-second shot clock in 06, he's not going to win the tournament. But for another thing, even if he does, we don't have any of the memorable quotes he had. They often came later in the hand when players were stewing over decisions. I feel like there's a lot of factors in here. I mean, I'm not going to protest the WSOP or anything if they institute a shot clock in the main event, but I just think that there's a few things to think about before we rush into this. I really do think they're going to institute one next year. I hope that it's 2 or 3 minutes long, and I hope that they make accommodations later on. So
I would be okay with being in the 2023 main event, but for next year, I think they should roll it out for other tournaments just to make sure that amateurs and other players are familiar with it, and it's been proven to work in a big scale tournament with thousands of players in it.
Yeah.
Particularly when you should maybe even have some sort of hand counter for how many hands a table is getting through on an average tournament day, just to compare. Okay, are we seeing these great deviations in certain tables, or if they all average out to the same amount, then what's the harm?
Yeah, I like that idea. Corral Demir also suggested on Twitter the idea of like a chess clock that, like, after you make your move, the clock stops, it starts for the other player, and you maybe each have like 5 minutes per hand or something. I think that could be interesting. I don't know about that exactly.
I think that's easier to do online than in person, though.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. And in like a heads-up scenario, Yeah, interesting. So just my thoughts about
it's a fair thought. It's worth talking about, especially since the main event will be moving from the Rio to a new home.
That's true, yeah.
So obviously, we could expect other changes potentially going forward. Maybe even just new chips too. I wonder if the poker chips they use in the World Series Poker will change. Because at Binions, they had different chips than what they had at the Rio, for example. So.
Yep. I think they announced that next year it's going to the Paris Casino, which is the casino that has the big Eiffel Tower out in the front. Yeah. And they were joking that they should have the final 2 players go up to the top of the Eiffel Tower and play there. I hope to God that happens. Also, one last thing, Vince Vaughn has been announced as the ambassador of the 2022 World Series of Poker. I don't know what that means, but Dodgeball is a good movie, so hopefully more people get invested in poker. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, Papo MC, go and subscribe to him on Twitter and listen to his raps. I wish he'd rapped more often at the final table. Okay.
All right, I think that covers our thoughts on this year's main event in the World Series of Poker. I think it's time to get into our third sort of course of this meal here for the podcast, and that is the start of the longest main event tournament broadcast yet, the 2010 WSOP Main Event. Kind of the last one of an era of sorts, and definitely the first one of a new era in many respects also.
Yeah, kind of a weird hybrid.
Yes, this is kind of the oddball main event we've had so far, because I know 07, 08, 09 had a lot of similarities. This was also kind of a new broadcast style, the production, the graphics, the display on the screen. Mm-hmm. And 2010 takes some of those and tweaks them a bit.
Right, yeah.
And gets rid of some of the things that we've complained about, but also adds some things that I'll complain about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting to sort of see the evolution of poker coverage through time.
And this is also the last year of the Poker Go category WSOP Classic. From here on, it's all quote-unquote modern main event broadcasts.
Yes, it's going to be sleek and new and nicely polished next year, I'm sure. 2011, just the production value just skyrockets.
So this main event was the second largest at the time,
mm-hmm.
kind of a rise. Now over 7,000 players, 7,319 players, wow. Meaning you have $8.9 million going to first, mm-hmm. So a slight increase from the last couple of years. Same structure. Same chips, same blinds, same number of levels per day, same beef jerky. That's all the same.
That's good. But I did notice the big difference for me was the music. I noticed that they had new music and stuff in there.
New music, new editing, new cuts, more energy. Kind of gives it that almost like a wrestling match kind of motif for some of the graphics, like the 2010 main event. When it says that, it's kind of like on this weird sort of light display as if it was over an arena.
Yeah.
Which again, I guess a poker arena. That's not technically too crazy of a leap. But so again, the intro is a little bit different. The graphics are different.
Yeah.
The actual text, so the font and the graphics themselves are different.
Yeah, and one of the things they added was the positions of the players, at least pre-flop. They mentioned very briefly, I think in the first episode, this is what under the gun means, this is what under the gun +1 means, and so on. Yes. I think it's an interesting choice.
So it's kind of an attempt for them to kind of elevate the lexicon and the terminology that the audience can expect to hear on the broadcast, which again I'm not against because they had completely kind of, besides under the gun and the blinds and the button, they really hadn't really gone into the other positions of the table really ever
mm-hmm.
up till this point. A slightly different display of the bet sizing.
Yeah.
It gives an exact bet sizing, not just a rounded off for bets that maybe were rounded. How many sig figs you wanted to use.
Mm-hmm.
The actual hand graphics are changed now. They're a little bit different. It's kind of hard to describe verbally, but if you compare 09 to 2010, you'll see what we're talking about. The way the cards are on the screen, how they look is different.
Yeah, did you feel the graphics in terms of their sizing was a little bit off? I felt like the names were a little too big and the sort of borders
again,
and stuff.
They sort of it was sort of a reformatting of those visuals for sure.
Yeah, and I don't really understand why that's the case, honestly. I think the old graphics were fine. They're not, a huge part of the coverage. It is nice to sort of, obviously it's nice to see what cards the players have. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have that or what their bet sizes are, but it's just kind of weird that they would do that overall.
They also did one thing. Now you can see the anti-size for the blinds.
Mm-hmm.
They just had the blinds in years past. So that's all.
That's nice.
Again, they're sort of, the math of the game is a bit more focused on, and the but not too deeply. We can get into, this is probably the biggest change. The tail of the tape.
Yeah,
is a big deal because an episode is kind of mostly geared towards one player's sort of day so far or their gameplay so far. So
mm-hmm.
Towards the end or maybe the middle third of the episode, they would show the tail of the tape, which would undergo either number of hands played, flop seen, hands won, chip differential, how much they're up or down in the day, and also the aggression factor.
Yeah, aggression seemed to be the thing that they were really talking about, which is interesting, sort of, in terms of what sort of style of play you're advertising, that you're discouraging tight players and stuff.
But my problem with that is that they don't really go into what aggression factor is.
Exactly. That too.
And also, I don't think aggression's a great number because it depends on what your cards are, too. Someone could play every single hand, but play them different enough that the number might not be reflected in the calculation.
Yeah.
Also the biggest problem, we'll get into this. We've seen the first batch of episodes. Again, we're only going off of the first 6 episodes or so
mm-hmm.
in 2010. But an episode is kind of like Negrono's day 2 journey, Kevin Smith's day 1 experience. So their number of hands played, for us, it's 100% because every hand that they show at that table is them playing it.
Right. Yeah.
But it's not reflected in the tail of tape because we're not seeing the them sit out hands or something like that. So I don't think that quite works sort of thematically for me.
Yeah, I mean, we should mention, it's a proxy, it's a sort of feature of day one coverage of the main event that you focus on the big players. But I also just feel like it takes away from the other players who are there. I'd like to see one or two hands from them, how their stats compare to the big pros we're looking at. And that's one of the problems I sort of have with these initial batches of episodes is we don't really get a good sense of the other players.
Absolutely.
There's so much focus on
these guys. They do often say like the average of the whole table and compare that to the main player of that episode, but not the individual breakdown of all other 8 players.
Yeah.
And that really is a shame. And they do actually include like how many hands they've gone through up to that point, which I think is pretty cool because I don't think that's really ever talked about is how many hands a player will play on one day of the main event.
Yeah.
The final tables in the later broadcasts do go hand by hand numerically. Poker blogs, break down each hand by hand so you can keep track that way. But in this sort of era of the main event, we don't really get that vibe. Mm-hmm. You might not be, you might think maybe they only play 100 hands the whole day, and you wouldn't know any better than that.
Yeah, but in terms of just getting into the actual coverage, I mean, what did you sort of think?
Well, there's definitely a decreased focus on segments.
Yeah, me too. Yeah,
we've complained about flashback segments. Oh, this player won the 05 poker championship here. Oh, here's a hand from that thing. That's pretty much not present so far. So I enjoyed that. Yeah. Even the interviews, I felt there's fewer or shorter more often. So it does seem like this is kind of more of a poker as a mathematical game and as like sort of a thematic sort of game and lifestyle is a bit more focused on than ever before.
Yeah.
Which has its ups and downs. It doesn't mean there's more time focused on these hands, but some of these hands are kind of forgettable or just kind of there to illustrate the ups and downs of that day for that player, not so much because they're memorable hands in of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of this weird hybrid that I feel like this is kind of their first year giving that style a try, and it does miss at times.
It feels to me like the editors are saying to themselves, the audience probably already knows these players, so we don't really have to characterize them. We can just focus on the hands. But I would have liked to have seen a little bit more personality in the interviews.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, it's shared a lot of similar structure similarities. Day one, each day one gets one episode dedicated to it.
Mm-hmm.
Day twos are broken into 2 episodes. And there's 2 different day 2, so there's again 4 episodes for day 1, 4 episodes for day 2. They obviously the selection of our main characters is not terrible, but it's sometimes kind of odd, some of their choices.
Yeah, I mean, we get Matusow right away. Nothing wrong with that.
Episode 1, we get Matusow on the feature table, and we get Eric Seidel and Noah Schwartz on day 2. Mm-hmm. I mean, table 2. And, I should note this was, again, the era of poker television where a lot of new players, younger internet players, brainiacs were kind of entering into the fray, not just in the main event, but also in poker, high-stakes poker after dark. You kind of had, the Tom Dwans, the Noah Schwartzes, the Phil Galfons, those kind of guys kind of getting into the mix. So less of the old guard kind of being the prominent figures.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So again, 2010 definitely felt like to me it was the most representative of that generation of players.
Yeah, I mean, this is right before Black Friday. Black Friday is April of 2011, isn't that right?
Yes, so this is kind of the last hurrah for a lot of these players in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, we get Matusow, and Matusow is Matusow, but unfortunately he's card dead through most of the episode.
And when he's not card dead, he folds the best hand.
Exactly. Or one of his cards gets exposed, and he can't play it. Mm-hmm. Which is probably my favorite moment in this entire episode. I was laughing earlier because I was just looking at my notes. Can a human being really run so bad, as Matusow says? Mm-hmm. It's a great line.
I mean, I think it's a pretty forgettable first episode. Matusow kind of just...
Yeah, he just doesn't get anything going.
Dips off into nothing. This is kind of the last Matusow we'll really see in a major way until 2019 in the main event. Mm-hmm. It was kind of funny that this was the very first episode I watched after my Vegas trip.
Yeah.
Given my Matusow interactions, so that was pretty funny. I did think that there was the bit about Ted Forrest's bet with Mike Matusow that was kind of amusing.
That is funny.
There were some pretty good. There's some pretty good stories like that in this in this main event. This is the first of those.
Yeah, of course.
For sure. But again, I think even more. I think this episode even less so than the next couple. Didn't really have much in the way of memorable hands or insight into the poker world.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, beside just Matusow folding a straight and getting aces exposed.
I flopped it. Why?
Nearly not that too much to really talk about. Grinder does show up in this episode.
Yes.
Which is, I think, is this the first time that a final tableist shows up in the first episode?
I think maybe we might have had one.
Yeah, we might have had one before, but I was surprised to see him right off the bat.
Right. Yeah, me too. Me too.
It's good. It's good that they're building his story right from the beginning instead of just the habit that.
Well, he'd been there at the PPC that year, so he was still very much in the zeitgeist of the 2010 poker sphere at that point.
Yeah, that's true.
Episode 2 has Gavin Smith and Ivan Demidov, and Gavin Smith again, kind of an odd choice for the primary character. I wonder if maybe it was meant to be Demidov, but then he didn't really last, so they couldn't really have it be about him.
Mm-hmm.
Because Gavin Smith, he's not really been shown winning a hand in the main event up to this point.
That's true.
You know what I mean? Like, I've never really seen him as like this top pro. I mean, he kind of was to a degree back then.
He won one bracelet?
No, he like got runner up to like Peter Feldman or something.
Yeah, like he's in the same camp as like Robert Williamson III, like these guys who get like a lot of coverage,
but don't really have like the results to like back them up. At least in my eyes, I'm naive to most of the poker scene by this point anyway.
Yeah, I mean they're like personable characters who are just kind of in the coverage, get brought up, get a lot of press, and then they just don't have results. They get like second in a couple bracelet events, and that's about it. But
the table 2, we get the young Annette Oberstadt.
Yeah.
Oberstadt, the youngest ever winner of any main events of any country's origin ever.
Yeah, the day before her 19th birthday, she wins the WSOP Europe event.
Unfortunately, it's the one that is not on Poker Go, so we can't even really discuss that tournament in any way because we don't have access to it.
Yeah, I did watch that tournament on YouTube.
I have too, but just not recently.
Yeah, and I remember hating the coverage of it because the final table was just bust out hands, except I think heads up they showed like 3 hands.
Yeah,
so you got no sense of her
very
plays.
04 style.
Yeah, you got no sense of how Annette played, and I mean Annette is hyped up this entire episode. I'd actually argue she's the main character of this episode, even though she's
I agree
too. She gets so much hype. She's this aggressive online player. She won a tournament without looking at her cards once, except she looked like at her cards once.
Yeah.
Because she just played off position. All this hype, and then she gets a pretty bad edit.
I mean, she makes an amazing folding a full house to a better full house.
Yeah.
The guy pretty much gives away his hand without giving it away by saying, "What's a flush?" and hope you have pocket eights. Like, I mean, it's still pretty impressive stuff, especially on a day one random table.
Yeah, but just her complaining about the guy, like saying, like, "Oh, you slow rolled me," and then she like hits a set, like just all that. Like, I'm talking about like her perception the perception you get of her as a viewer, I think, is negative.
And then she says, "Girls suck at poker." Like that is unbelievable. I couldn't believe she said that.
Not true. Jeez.
And then Gavin Smith, though, his kind of episode, they had agreed to the old show one game where they all show one card
just
after a hand, and it basically means Gavin gets bluffed at his own game. He gets screwed by his own game, and I mean Gavin spends most of the episode getting bluffed by his tailmates, which is kind of funny. I enjoy that kind of dynamic. So
yeah, that is funny. Yeah.
Yep. We do see good roster of people at our table in this episode. We see Belland, Elke, Jamie Gold very briefly.
Jamie Gold after getting busted.
Yes, of course.
Just leaving. Love you, buddy, but
we do meet Doan, who was a sufferer of cancer, had her leg amputated.
Yeah.
And a lot of her poker community shaved their heads in solidarity. It's a pretty nice story.
It was a nice story, yeah. There's usually one of those in every coverage.
I mean, I definitely enjoyed episode 2 more than episode 1. I mean, I can't speak for as far as how the quality of the hands played. I mean, nothing mind-blowing, nothing too bad, though, because Gavin being bluffed is pretty funny, and that's pretty entertaining, this episode altogether.
Annette is entertaining, yeah, but I just think the edit she gets, she's just not good at it. I mean, just her last hand, her shoving out of turn,
yes.
Almost shoving, having like one chip left. It's just crazy.
Yes.
And Filippo Candio does show up briefly.
He does. So we get our second final table list in episode 2. So
yeah, very good.
Finally starting, yes. Episode 3, we have Calm Kata and Hot-Headed Helmuth.
I like that.
Kata in his title defense and Helmuth in this boxing title match of his.
Yeah, we should mention that right at the first episode, Kata does this segment sort of hyping it up, and I really like that segment.
Yes.
Right at the start episode where it's like, it starts right here, that
yes.
sort of thing. Kata was just a great ambassador for the game in 09 and 10, so
yes.
Great to see that.
So, Joe Kata has, very similar to kind of Hashem's 06 day 1, where he just kind of keeps making hands, chipping up and up and up. And again, one of the main focuses they really have on these day 1 episodes is discussing how the main character's chip stack is doing in that day. Like, oh, he's on the rise. The chips keep coming in. He's at 50, not at 60, not at 70,000. Which I guess narratively speaking, it seems to be just too by the numbers, literally and figuratively. Yeah. Just like, oh, his chip stack's higher. Oh, it's lower. I mean, I don't know how you think about that, but
no, I'm with you. I mean, I would like to see. If there's a rise and fall here, I'd like to see what those rises and falls are. I'd like to just see, is he just picking up chips pre-flop? Is he doing anything post-flop? Mm-hmm. What's his table talk like? I mean, you do make the comparison to Joe Hashem. Joe Hashem in 06 being a grumpy old man. Joe Kata being a little bit more even-keeled and not exactly, yes. Beaming with, friendliness, but fairly friendly guy at the table.
I mean, Kata pretty much has smooth sailing all of day 1.
Yeah.
We do see him talking about his time on the Letterman. Letterman.
Right.
And that was, kind of a fun little... Anytime you mix poker with not poker television, I think that's pretty interesting to see, how other parts of the entertainment world view poker and how that interacts with the players.
Yeah, I mean, I was mentioning how Kata was just such a good ambassador for the game. I mean, poker got a lot of mainstream press after he won, probably because he was the youngest ever and he's a very personable guy. Mm-hmm. So I mean, he just did a really good job just sort of promoting poker and yes. so on. It's funny how Letterman confused him with Penn and Teller. That's really funny.
Yes, that's really funny. Yeah. At table 2, we get Helmuth in one of his most pretentious outfits yet.
Pretentious.
In a boxing title match uniform, where he actually sits down in his costume, has the hood block his view of the table, and he plays a hand and loses, of course. I mean, I thought that was pretty funny.
And right before all the players decide to have a bounty against Helmuth.
Yes.
That should be
illegal. And ironically, none of them get the bounty because the table gets broken. So it's useless.
I think that should be illegal. You can't do that.
And unlike a lot of these sort of table 2 top pros bust out episodes, he actually wins one hand in the coverage, which is that's pretty rare. Yeah, I thought that pretty amusing to me.
Yeah, he broke the streak.
He ends up having a nemesis in James Carroll, who just completely crushes Phil.
Yeah,
bit by bit. At our tables, we do see my other favorite, Daniel Negreanu, going crazy with rags, 4-3 offsuit in the bluff.
Crazy.
We do see Esfandiari and Chao Jiang in a couple of big hands. With Esfandiari getting the last laugh. We do see a montage of all of Helmuth's various entrances, which is again fitting considering his entrance in 2021 was his Gandalf costume.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah.
So that was pretty funny.
I missed that live, by the way, but
yep. We do see Tom Dwan kind of in a spotlight, how he played 52 out of 54 events in the World Series of Poker, which I guess means he must have busted pretty early in a lot of them, because a lot of them have the same first day in the schedule.
Yeah, I mean, he had a bracelet bet on himself.
Yes.
To win. I think it was just one bracelet, or was it more than one?
I think it was just one.
He got second place once, and that was about it.
So not even close.
Yeah, and he loses a prop bet, so he has to wear a button of Peter Jin hugging a koala bear that I just think is very weird. It's this huge button that's right on his chest, you can't miss it.
Yeah.
And they hype him up he's this internet guy, he had this bracelet bet, all the players bet on him to win a bracelet and he busts.
Yes.
It's just so anticlimactic.
I agree. We do see the return of Heads Up of Norm in a magic sort of display as Esfandiari, which, again, I think that segment has had a higher batting average for me overall, so this one was fine, I guess. It was really the first segments we've had so far. 3 episodes in.
3 episodes in, There's a good joke, Esfandiari makes Norm disappear, and then when it cuts back to the podcast, Lon says, "Big spike in the ratings I just heard after Norm disappears," and Norm says, "Good for you." I always like that.
That was well done. That was well done.
Yeah.
I think this episode, though, is the most emblematic of how useless the tail of the tape bit is, though, in this episode. If you watch, it's just not particularly important to me how it's used here.
Yeah, it's not important to me in general. I
know,
it's
but
nice,
I mean, there are ways that you can use it, but that was the worst of all 3 days so far, for sure.
Yeah.
Episode 4, our final day 1 session. Darvin Moon returns to the featured table.
Yep.
Ivy is in the intro, but not actually at one of the main 2 tables.
Yeah, weird, huh?
We have Doyle Brunson, though, at table 2. So, ironically, really, you think about our 4 main characters. We had Matusow, Gavin Smith, and then the first and second people from the last main event. So, kind of an odd sort of quartet of choices there, for sure.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Matusow, pretty standard. He's been at table 1 almost every year since 05, besides 07 at table 2.
Yeah, Hellmuth, same obvious choice.
Yes.
But it's just, Gavin Smith, I mean, instead of Daniel Negreanu, instead of, it's just an odd choice.
I agree. So Darvin Moon, or Darvin Gump, as we call him, rest in peace, Darvin, but he does some pretty Darvin Moony kind of things, for sure. He commits, I guess, one of the top poker faux pas, which is chucking the nuts when you're last to act on the river. But of course, Darvin does justify he wanted to see his opponent's cards, and he knows he's not going to call a bet. So I think that's kind of a weird and kind of gray area that I think is reasonable to assume that Darvin was allowed to do that.
Yeah, I think he just didn't know what the rules were.
I mean, he says he didn't know that.
Yeah, I wouldn't know that rule.
And he gets a one-hand penalty to that, so again, not a terrible penalty, but still something negative for him.
He didn't say, turn over his jack when he was 3-handed for the final table.
That's true.
Yeah.
We haven't mentioned the wild card hands at all yet, but we do see Darvin Moon with the wild card hand here against Kings and making a straight with it, and Norm kind of guessing the hand half right. Again, this is kind of the start of where Norm guessing the hand right or wrong or being half right. I think it's pretty funny.
Yeah, of course.
Because a lot of these hands are kind of on the mess side anyway, so whatever you can do to make them more entertaining for a TV point of view is important.
Yeah, of course. And I just like the hands in general. I mean, just even if the hands themselves aren't that good, it just adds a little bit of a break from the podcast.
This episode it's mostly smooth sailing for Brunson and Moon all episode. They both win their share of hands, chip up. Again, not much of a narrative journey for them either at any point. This episode really is, for me, all about the side details, so the subplots.
Yeah.
The first one being possibly one of my favorite sort of interview stories of all time, the Steve Sanders, Dennis Phillips story.
Crazy story.
I know, especially me being someone who has had many of patients with similar conditions. That was quite amusing, because I know how dangerous those things can be.
Yeah, so just to recap what happened. So Steve Sanders in 2009 was with a hand with Dennis Phillips. Phillips rivered it on him, so Sanders busts and leaves. And then he goes back to his hotel room and he has chest pain. And it turns out that it was a heart problem?
It was a aortic aneurysm.
Oh, wow.
So if it lasted and determined any longer, it would have meant it would have been longer for him to get medical treatment, and he probably would have died had that not been fixed in that timely fashion. So
yeah,
that was pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's a pretty sober segment. He mentions that he thanked Dennis Phillips afterward, and then I just love how they edited it. The segment ends and it cuts to a Steve Sanders hand, which is often the case that after a segment like this, you get a hand from the player, and he's with an ER doctor. That's just brilliant. That's just such great editing.
Yes.
Yeah.
We do see Darvin Moon talking about how he's still the same old Darvin after his second place finish, buying some cars, being a part of the Saints sort of Super Bowl run, kind of a run of New Orleans sports sort of success. That was kind of funny. Ivy discusses how he approaches the main event now and his regrets at the final table, which, again, really, he made 1 or 2 bad plays at the final table, really.
Yeah, he folded the jacks.
That's about it. That's it. And we do see the first of kind of this someone winning a bracelet spotlight segment with Ivy winning a bracelet in 2009. Again, this will be very, very regular in the next couple of main events. But again, I don't really care about that.
Yeah, it's nice to know how other
I mean, it was Ivy winning it, so that it gets a pass in that respect, but it's going to be like random players from this point on.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
So again, of 4 day 1 episodes, nothing particularly great. I mean, a couple of good spots here and there, but nothing that got me excited. But then again, it is day 1, so it's hard to be too high in your expectations.
Yeah, a whole table wore Snuggies. That's pretty cool.
Oh, yes, that was so the shaky light, and they're all wearing. That was pretty fun. That was the only memorable outer table thing I really had to say of this episode.
Yeah, the guy says shuffle up and play instead of shuffle up and deal. For shame.
Yes. So that literally leads us into our final 2 episodes to talk about for 2010. It's the Daniel Negreanu Day 2 2-parter. And again, compared to the year previous is Jason Alexander and Greg Raymer 2-parter in Day 2. What are your thoughts on how they compare?
Yeah, I mean, I thought these 2 episodes were fine. I mean, again, I think we said this before, that I do like that they keep the tables the same into the second part, because it just really just lets you tell stories.
But the problem is we don't know anybody else on this table besides Negreanu.
That's the problem.
Even though some players do last from episode 5 into episode 6 and even are involved in some hands in both episodes against Negreanu, we don't know a thing about them.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and Negreanu, is personal enough to have little conversations with the other players. So you get like a little bit of a sense of their conversations, but not too much.
Yes. I mean, a couple players even kind of get it. They beat Negreanu in one hand and then lose the next one, or vice versa, and that's fine. But Negreanu begins episode. To me, this is very much a kind of a sequel to D-Neg's 07 main event Day 2. Yeah. The difference being that the blinds were so much less aggressive that Negreanu kind of got the chance to play more hands on this Day 2 than he did in 07 for sure. So Negreanu begins with 24,000 chips. Below starting stack, doubles up on the first hand, sound familiar? And from there he kind of goes on these ups and downs. While on table 2, we got Mr. Patrick Antonius, who just is the receiver of much love from both the crowd and Norman Chad.
Oh my God!
As Antonius pretty much just goes on a clinic against the whole table, just winning every single hand he's involved with in the coverage,
and getting just so much attention about his looks and so on. I think we've mentioned before how that happens with the women. This is the first time we see it with the men. Just relentless, absolutely nonstop.
Now, at one point, I did find kind of amusing was that they mentioned how James Carroll and Daniel Negreanu both had researched their table before the Day 2 began, which again was exactly what I did for Adam before his Day 2 and Day 3 main event table draws. So that was kind of amusing to see.
Yeah, why wouldn't you do that?
And not only did they do that, they actually mentioned it in the episode. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is funny.
Yeah. We do see Billy Kopp involved in yet another flush versus flush hands. This time on the winning side.
He's got the better of it now.
We do see Negreanu kind of discussing his previous main event results, why he thinks he's struggled in the main event the last couple of years. Billy Kopp discussing his infamous hand against Darvin Moon with 12 left in the main event in 09. How he actually thought that Darvin Moon was going to fold a flush on a paired board. But it's like, if you think he's going to flush, why are you doing this then? Why even risk it?
No, I mean, what, you think he's got 9-7 of diamonds? He's got a king-high flush, dude. You need to read him better.
So again, Day 2, Part 1 ends with Negreanu, of course, winning a hand and kind of ending it on the upswing. But Part 2 kind of reverses course. As the blinds are, going up for the table, Negreanu again, he wins a hand, and memorably, one guy in the crowd goes, "Whoa!" And then Negreanu kind of is startled by the one guy randomly in the crowd doing that. I mean, it's pretty funny.
That is good. I like that a lot. Yeah. Yeah, it's just more the Negreanu show and Antonius
show for sure.
Yeah.
But with one exception, of course, and that is the infamous Donkbusters Part 2 hands at the outer table.
Here we go.
Chris Moneymaker against some random guy named Pellegrino, where apparently Pellegrino supposedly had moved all in instantly after Moneymaker had made a bet, and then the camera crew, the dealer, and Moneymaker, nobody caught wind of that bet, so Moneymaker was of course surprised by it, and he just decides to call anyway, and the guy instantly knocks his hand, just the most disgusting, angry look, it must have been an angle shoot, right?
I think that's an angle shoot. If nobody else at the table, first off, how do you go all in without anybody knowing? I don't understand that. Did you whisper all in? Like, I don't get it. So that's number one. And number two, like, yeah, it's an ankle shoot, I think.
But I'm just so curious, what did Pellegrino have? I mean, what could he have possibly had if he just instantly mucked before Moneymaker showed his cards? I mean...
He had Moneymaker had, what, ace-10 for two?
Yeah, top pair. It was a 10-8, 7-7-3 board or something like that.
Yeah, like... yeah, if nobody has heard it at the table, it doesn't count. It doesn't matter if you've gone all in or what your action is. I just don't get that. Should have gotten a penalty or something.
Donald Busters.
We missed that.
We do see Lil Margetts, who won a bracelet recently in the 2021 World Series of Poker.
Nice.
In this episode, she was bust, but she backed up her 27th place finish in 09 with a day 2 only 10. And again, she has, anytime I enjoy seeing a player in our episode watching and having some success nowadays. So that's always fun for me to see.
Of course. And speaking of that, Gary Gates shows up against Scotty Wynn. Just a hand just to show Scotty Wynn, but it's funny to be like, that's Gary Gates.
I know.
Yeah.
We do see. Again, another very great, very interesting story about Mercer.
Yeah.
Heather Sue Mercer being involved in a landmark court case regarding college football and discrimination and sexism, and that was something I did not see coming.
Yeah, so she was a kicker for college football team. She was selected to go to Duke University and be on their football team as a full member and be one of the few or possibly the only woman in college football. But then they opted not to select her. And apparently the coach made some sexist comments toward her or something. So she sued for gender discrimination, won $2 million, which is pretty sizable.
Yes.
But apparently didn't get the money because some Supreme Court ruling about college football and you can't pay that. So she now runs a bakery and she had a little cookie with her. So if she made the end of the day, she would eat the cookie, and she made the end of the day, so you get to see her eat the cookie. But
that's pretty funny.
Very interesting story. Yeah, there's a Wikipedia page on it.
And it's one of the best quote there was that basically the quote says, I discriminate against you, but it's not against the rules.
Yeah, and she's in tears during the segment too. They cut to an interview and she's clearly emotional. Wow, it's a hell of a story. We also, there's another story about this chess player named, what was his name again? Sarwar.
Yes.
Jeff Sarwar, who was this genius chess prodigy. This was more in the previous episode than this one. And was 13 years old, a grandmaster, and then just had to stop playing chess and went to another country and was living out there. And now he's coming back and playing poker. I thought that was really interesting too. They just picked up these batch of really interesting stories to get over.
Yeah, for sure. That's been one of the strongest parts of this main event so far.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shame that none of these players read any of the featured tables.
Yeah.
It just shows that they're trying to have it both ways. In that they're trying to focus on the math of the game and the stats of the game, and still highlight some of the oddball stories in the field, but not anybody that we're seeing. Not combining the two together. Yeah. So that's been one letdown so far for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like the human elements more than I like the math elements. It's okay to have a bit of the math, but I much prefer just hearing the
But it's almost not enough math. It's you need to go deeper for it to really mean anything. It's just too superficial.
Yeah.
I will say though, that episode 6 was one of my favorites of this batch of 6 episodes though.
Yeah.
Dean Eggs kind of gets bothered by some of his foes asking for his chip counts when it's you can't see him, they're right there. Good luck counting them. Sometimes he's a pretty good wild card hand bluff of 6 high.
6 high, yeah.
Negrano makes a pretty ill-advised bluff against Mr. Hook in one of the last hands of the episode.
Oh yeah.
And he ends day 2 pretty much level on where he began the day with, so not very good, very short stock for day 3, which we'll obviously briefly see going forward. But
and meanwhile, Antonius is just steamrolling his table, winning, cracking aces with 5-3 or something.
5-3 suited for a 200,000 chip pot. He hits 300,000 chips on the end of the day. Pretty crazy. We do see some of the Mizrakis, Griner discussing busting his brother at the final table of the PPC, so you can no way and say there was any collusion there whatsoever.
Oh, God, correct, yeah.
And we do see another one of the bracelets wins by David Bates.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, I don't care. It's the main event here. If I want to know about the other events, I'll watch other events.
Same here, yeah. And we do see Antonio Esfandiari busting in I like the hand. He's a coin. He says he's Ellen with a coin flip. He goes, I'm pretty good at coin flips. It's my thing. It's a Persian specialty. He's like announcing to the rest of the room what he has. And then he loses the hand, and you can tell how angry he is. He's gracious enough to shake everyone's hands. He doesn't just, fuck off like he does in later years. But, it's a funny, nice hand.
So again, that's just kind of the first batch of episodes. We have many more to go.
Mm-hmm.
This tournament will go to a day 8 and then a final table. We've only covered halfway of the day 2 stuff. We've only seen 2 of our 9 final tableists, so we still have much more to see. Hopefully, some more crazy poker play. Again, you get a sense that there are a couple of pretty bizarre, awful plays by some amateurs here and there, but. We'll see some pretty wild ones going forward for sure.
Yeah.
Condio.
Condio, yeah. We just get a little bit of Condio, mainly a lot of Grinder sort of talking about, how he's in position for player of the year and so on. So it is interesting that they're building that narrative right off the bat. Yes. It's going to play through for the rest of the coverage.
But next time on our podcast, we'll discuss the second half of day 2.
Yep.
Going forward, we'll get a neck brace-free Dan Harrington and a Phil Hellmuth coachless Jeff Shulman.
Yeah.
But again, that is a topic for another time. Anything else you want to talk about before we sign off?
Obviously, same old. Feel free to comment, share a post on Reddit, whatnot. If you ever bust us out of a tournament, you know what our handles are. We'll give you a shout in the next episode. Feel free to ask any questions. We'll try to answer them. Hope you all had a nice Thanksgiving. Enjoy the start of the holiday season. Make sure to do your shopping early. Buy from local stores.
Okay, rant over. Thank you. And again, let us know if you want to be a part of our broadcast. We're happy to include all of our listeners in our episodes.
Yeah, any stories that you have, if you were in the coverage at all, if you were just in the background of one shot and you saw Phil Hellmuth on a rant, we want to hear from you.
And if you saw me at Vegas, if you're a player that was, wondering why that guy was awkwardly watching from the rail, then, let me know, and I'm happy to bring that up for sure.
Late Reg forever.